I hope you guys enjoyed your pizza. I like to say your impromptu pizza. First of all, I want to thank every single one of you for being here with me this afternoon. I know a lot of you have work and you have other responsibilities. I know Katrina 20 has a thousand events going on, but all of you made the time to be here. So we at the Water Collaborative team and my speakers are incredibly grateful for the time to speak to you about legislation. So first of all, for those who may not be familiar with me, my name is Jessica Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Collaborative in Greater New Orleans. The Water Collaborative focuses on creating community-driven policy solutions to actualize water as a human right in a climate unstable world. So we focus on issues ranging from stormwater management to water affordability, accessibility, and quality, to other things such as resilience and reassessing and reimagining what resilience looks like, to insurance, and ensuring that water is not only a priority for the people of the state, but is really put forward nationally as a core environmental justice issue. For those who are not sure why they're here today, I hope you do, but no, this is a part of NOLA Water Week. This is the first annual, I've been saying this all week, but this is a labor of love. I've been planning this since 2019. And in 2021, we thought we got there, and Ida had other plans. So I'm really excited to bring it back in full force. This is our 4th event so far. Amazing attendance every night, so much engagement, and I think this is going to be definitely by far one of everybody's favorite, or maybe least favorite when you learn about it. The last thing I'll say is the theme is Spirit in Us. It's a Latin word from actually the 1500s, and it stands for the healing power of breathing. When I wanted to put this idea forward, I wanted to create something that was a little bit different from all the other Katrina events. So many of them, especially the news articles this week coming out, are about what happened 20 years ago. And for those like myself who lived through Hurricane Katrina, I don't necessarily need to be reminded. But what I do want to do is focus on the future. How do we build together, create together, and how do we make sure, whether it's social justice, cultural integrity, housing, whatever the issues, how do we ensure that climate and water are at the forefront of every single one of those conversations? So the goal of NOLA Water Week is not only to do that, but to create new communities and be a bridge builder for people who maybe aren't always in these conversations. So for some of you who maybe this is your first time interacting with us, know that you're welcome to participate in many other things with us. And then I just want to quickly thank our sponsors, because without them this would not be possible. Firstly, I want to thank the Andrew Kite Center, where we're all currently sitting. They were so generous to provide the space to be kind, and they have been phenomenal partners throughout the week. I also want to thank Liquid ID. They have been a phenomenal partner as well, and we're really excited to work with them more and present some really interesting things in the coming months and years. Also, they're not a sponsor of today's event, but they are a sponsor of our Watermelon Fest this Sunday. If you guys are not sure what to do on Sunday, we have a Watermelon Fest, the first annual, and the only one in the state of Louisiana right now. From 4 to 8, we partner with Bruce, who is an excellent sponsor, who's providing space, and also providing a ton of other amenities for us. They've been incredibly accommodating, so please give them some love next time you get your mimosa. Lastly, I want to thank our weekday sponsors. Again, without them, this would not be possible. I want to thank Restore, Mississippi River Delta Coalition, Earth Justice, Environmental Defense Fund, Black Girl Environmentalists, Bachelor Engineering, Policy Link, and Black and Marine Science. So again, thank you so much. For quick orders of business, if you're looking for the restrooms, they're toward the front by the entrance, either to the left or right, and they're gender neutral bathrooms, I believe. And we have an entire team in front, so if you need more water, need more food, anything else, there's lots of people around. So feel free to take care of yourself in this moment. Without further ado, I think I will hand it off to our policy director, Rebecca Miller. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think Jessica said it really, really well, and I know that we, like any event, things sort of get spread out. So without further ado, no event is complete without a keynote to set the tone. And today we're honored to welcome Senator Royce Duplessis to set that tone for us, so no pressure, Senator. Senator Duplessis serves as a member of the Louisiana State Senate for District 5, representing New Orleans and a portion of Jefferson Parish after serving 4 years in the Louisiana House of Representatives. While serving in legislature, he passed criminal justice reforms, championed legislation to expand access to affordable health care, prioritized efforts to allow for paid sick leave, worked to make housing more affordable, and fought to enact a living wage. Senator Duplessis was awarded the 2023 Calogero Champion of Justice Award for his commitment to youth justice, his partnership with the Louisiana Center for Children's Rights in the state legislature, and his tireless efforts to make his community a better place. He is a graduate of St. Augustine High School and Howard University School of Law and has his own legal practice, the Duplessis Law Firm. He and his wife Crystal are the proud parents of one daughter, Reese, and reside in Central City. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage. Switch things up. We're going to give him a chance to get settled in for a second, and I'm going to actually bring out Kennedy Moore, who is our state policy coordinator, to talk about the session. And then we'll bring him in, and then we'll give him an even bigger and more memorable. This is the practice, y'all.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we?
Very good.
Thank you all for coming out today. My name is Kennedy Moore. I'm the state policy coordinator for the Water Collaborative. So I would like to walk you all through a little bit of what the overall themes of this year's Louisiana legislative session were as they relate to water utilities, homeowner and flood insurance, funding, energy, and state governance. The legislature drafted hundreds of important bills and passed dozens of laws that reshape how our state handle infrastructure, utilities, flood, and coastal protection. Beginning with the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans, accountability and transparency for SWMNO seem to be a focus for this year's session, with the common thread involving placing operational guardrails. Lawmakers debated several bills aimed at tightening oversight, requiring better reporting processes, and restructuring internal operations. Regarding homeowner and flood insurance, affordability and flexibility for Louisiana homeowners facing skyrocketing premiums was a heavy focus for lawmakers. The standout law here credits a portion of the current tax on the gross premium of homeowner insurance policies and related revenues to the Louisiana Fortified Homes Fund. Alongside that, the legislature passed a resolution urging the United States Congress to roll back FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 system due to its formula's cause of driving sharp flood insurance increases. Next, the lawmakers that focus on funding and appropriations for water management have continued to fund previously funded water, sewer, flood, and coastal protection projects with clear benefits. For example, a new law directs the use of surplus revenues across multiple funding sources to be used towards rainy day funds and allocates millions of dollars for water sector, home fortification, and capital improvement projects throughout the entire state. At the crossroads of energy and water policy, several laws will now reshape how Louisiana regulates renewables, carbon storage, and what we officially describe as green energy. Namely, a new law redefines green energy in Louisiana law to not only include renewable energy, but also natural gas and nuclear power. Alongside this law, carbon capture revenues will now be shared with local parishes, while energy and conservation oversight will now be consolidated into a new department. The common thread amongst these laws with regard to energy and water policy involves easier development of big energy projects, potentially at the expense of stricter climate or environmental standards. Finally, the legislature made several changes for how Louisiana governs water management at the state level during this session. The laws passed covered several topics such as statewide flood planning, with the most impactful example being a new law which creates a coordinated use for resources, recreation, economy, navigation, and transportation, otherwise known as the current authority. A new body meant to coordinate non-coastal and water projects. As of up to now, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority focused on coastal areas of the state, leaving inland flooding issues without a unified agency. Additionally, Louisiana's definition of waters of the state has now been narrowed to exclude wetlands that lack a continuous surface connection to other waters. The theme of state governance for water management seemed to be the centralization and standardization, with the state asserting more authority over water management. Each of these themes reflects our lawmakers' abilities to respond to residents' concerns about costs, reliability, and resilience. However, there are pitfalls to these new structures. Centralizing authorities may make government more efficient, but it has the potential to distance decision-making from communities that are most affected. Therefore, looking ahead, we must ensure these laws actually deliver results for people on the ground, and that includes reliable water systems, fair insurance rates, effective flood protection, sustainable energy changes, and meaningful operational reform. These laws passed during this session set the stage for these results, but it will take community engagement and continued investment to turn legislative framework into real resilience for Louisiana. So now I'll welcome Royce Duplessis to the stage to do a quick keynote speech about what all went on during this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Look, first of all, I want to apologize. Sorry. I was actually a little confused just now. I thought that the panel was about to go, or did the panel go? Anyway, thank you. I'm sorry for being late. I promise I will not be long, but I'm honored to be here today to speak to you all about a very, very important subject matter that I've been fortunate to serve in the legislature as we try to work around this issue of protecting our city and working on issues around water, insurance, everything resilience related. So I appreciate the Water Collaborative for organizing today's panel and giving me the opportunity to share a few words with you all. As you know, my name is Royce Duplessis, and I've been serving in the state legislature for a couple of years now. I've been 4 in the House, now a little bit over 3 in the Senate. But we gather here today to talk about something that goes to the very heart of who we are as New Orleans, and that's resilience. We live in a city built between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain, surrounded by wetlands and waters, sustained by the very forces that test us. We know better than most what it means to face storms, floods, and disasters, both natural and man-made. So as I stand before you this afternoon, a few things are clear. Resilience should not be about bouncing back after disaster, after disaster, after disaster. Instead, resilience must mean building a city where our people, our homes, and our infrastructures are protected, so that when the next storm comes, New Orleans doesn't just survive, but shows the nation the power of utilizing a plan that accepts the realities of global warming and climate change with innovative tools and technology. I speak to you today not only as a candidate for mayor, but as a son of this city and as a legislator who has worked on these very issues. I grew up in New Orleans watching my neighbors board windows. Board these windows before hurricanes while waiting anxiously as the winds howled, then stepping outside to see what was left. I've seen the heartbreak of water lines stretching halfway up the living room walls. Those living room walls were my family's walls, our family's walls. I've sat with those families and been among those families who wondered if they'd be able to return home. I felt the pride of watching our people rebuild again and again, even when the world doubted us. That lived experience is why I believe so deeply in New Orleans. And I believe New Orleans needs leadership that understands both the pain and the promise of our situation. We cannot afford to treat resilience as an afterthought. It must be a daily priority, woven into every decision that we make. We are not starting from scratch. Leaders right here in New Orleans have already begun laying the foundation. People like my friend, Angela Chaw, Waterwise, Healthy Communities, the Water Collaborative, and the Greater New Orleans Foundation, just to name a few, because there's so many others. They've all stepped up with critical investments and bold ideas. They've shown us what's possible when local talent and local investors lead the way. As your next mayor, I will build on their work, and I will bring international leaders to the table so that New Orleans has the resources, the technology, and the partners to become the most resilient city in America. Because here's the truth. Resilience is not just about walls and pumps. It's about people. It's about protecting livelihoods. It is about securing a future for our children. I know this not just from stories, but from my work as a state legislator. We're in the midst of an insurance crisis in our state, where families are drowning in insurance premiums. The people here sitting in this audience today, drowning in insurance premiums that we cannot afford. I'm among those people too. And this crisis has been going on for too long. I've met with residents who told me that they're spending more on insurance than on their mortgage. I've listened to business owners who say that they can't keep their doors open because the coverage has been pulled. I knew something had to change. So I partnered with Housing NOLA. See my friend underneath Morris right there. And we partnered to author bills to lower premiums, to create real accountability benchmarks for insurers, and to expand funding for the Fortified Roof Program statewide. I fought because no homeowner should have to lie awake at night wondering if they can keep their home insured. And I fought because protecting our homes is protecting our wealth, that is protecting our communities, and that is protecting our future. That same urgency, that same commitment, that's what I'll bring to City Hall. So let me share my plan to make New Orleans stronger, safer, and more resilient. First, fortified roofs. I'll work to install fortified roofs on 25% of homes in New Orleans. This one change alone can drastically reduce storm damage and lower insurance costs for everyone. I've already helped expand this program statewide, and now I want to do more to bring it home, because we can't wait on the state. Second, financing resilience. Too often, upgrades like gutters, permeable pavement, or rainwater systems are out of reach for working families. I will collaborate with lenders and partners to make it more affordable for residents to fortify their homes and to protect their investments. Third, sponge infrastructure. We will transform vacant lots and neutral grounds into living infrastructure, biosoils, rain gardens, and permeable paving to capture stormwater before it floods our neighborhoods. Imagine a city where we use empty lots and neutral grounds that are working to keep homes safe. We can do it, and we have to do it. Fourth, we have to fix what's broken. For too long, our infrastructure and repair backlogs has left streets crumbling and neighborhoods vulnerable. I will use technology to create transparent public works dashboards and overhaul capital planning so that urgent community-driven repairs, they come first. Fifth, we create a home resilience course. Partnering with organizations like Thrive, we'll train and hire young people from right here in New Orleans to weatherize, repair, and fortify homes, especially in low-income neighborhoods. This will not only protect families, but it will also create good paid jobs and give our youth the skills that they can carry for the rest of their life. I see my good friend from the Green Corps here. Thank you for the work that you do. 6, we're going to empower residents. Knowledge is power, and too many families don't know their flood risk or even how to lower their insurance costs. My administration will connect residents to every available state and federal program so no one is left behind. And finally, I will govern as a resilience partner, not just a passive bystander. And that means that every city department, every city dollar, and every city plan will support climate-smart growth. We will not wait for the next disaster. We will prepare, we will strengthen, and we will lead. Now let me be clear. These are priorities that I've laid out in my opportunity agenda. It's not just a policy platform, we call it the opportunity agenda. And this is personal. I think of the families in Gentilly who couldn't afford to repair their roofs after Ida. I think of the young family in Algiers who invested everything in their first home, only to see their flood insurance double in a single year. We've seen that too often. I think of the small business owners throughout this city who know that if we don't get ahead of these challenges, they won't be able to keep the doors open. And I think about New Orleans and the hard lessons we've learned and the hard lessons we've overcome as a city 20 years after Hurricane Katrina. These are not just statistics. These are the families who make New Orleans the city that we love. And I refuse to accept a future where they feel unprotected and they feel left behind. My friends, defending our city is not just about building levees or fixing roads. It's about protecting the people who call New Orleans home. We can do this. We must do this. And with your trust and collaboration, we will do this. Because New Orleans has always been a city that fights back. A city that finds strength in its struggles. And a city that proves to the world that no matter what, we will endure. Together, let's defend our city. Let's protect our people. Together, let's build a resilient New Orleans for generations to come. Thank you. God bless you. May God bless the city that we love. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator, for the amazing. Let's give another round of applause. I'm going to take some time to now introduce our wonderful expert panelists. So starting off with Andronika Morris. Andronika serves as the Executive Director for House of NOLA, a 10-year partnership between citizens, elected officials, policymakers, advocates, and dozens of public, private, and nonprofit organizations working to end the city's affordable housing crisis. She also serves as the president of the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance, whose numbers and partners were responsible for creating over 88,000 housing opportunities after Katrina. For leading Housing NOLA's efforts, Consumer Federation of America named Andronika one of its 5 consumer champions in 2021. Most recently, the University of New Hampshire celebrated and spotlighted her work through its 2023 Sustainability Awards program. Up next, we have Charles Sutcliffe. Charles joined the National Wildlife Federation as their Senator Advisor for Resilience in 2024 after spending more than a decade in the Louisiana governor's office. While in the governor's office, he worked on policy in support of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority in the 2012, 2017, and 2023 master plans, and was the lead staff for the Governor's Advisory Commission. In 2020, Charles was a part of the governor's small team running the Climate Initiatives Task Force and helping to develop the 2022 Climate Action Plan. In the same year, he became the state's first Chief Resilience Officer, working to broaden the state's approach to managing the implications of the coastal crisis and multiple environmental hazards. Charles is from Baton Rouge and attended college at LSU and has a master's degree from New York University. Next up, we have Chris Waldalbaum. Chris is the director of the Tulane Institute on Water Resources, Law and Policy. He leads the institution's vision and planning and supervises and coordinates the work of postgraduate fellows and student researchers. Prior to coming to Tulane, Chris served in the Peace Corps in El Salvador and studied cultural geography in Louisiana and Virginia. He's been called the Kai Ryssdal of water policy, so at least he's got that. Up next is Jackson Voss. Jackson is the Alliance for Affordable Energy's Government Affairs and Policy Coordinator, focused on federal and state opportunities to transform Louisiana's policy environment and better protect the state and its people from the worst effects of climate change. Before joining the Alliance, Jackson worked as a policy analyst for Invest in Louisiana, the Kathleen Blanco Public Policy Center, and the United States Senate. Originally from New Orleans, he is a proud graduate of LSU and the University of Michigan's Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy. Last but not least, we have Peter Robbins Brown. Peter has been the executive director of Louisiana Progress, a progressive policy and advocacy organization that fights for poor and working class Louisianans since 2021. In that time, Louisiana Progress has led or co-led successful campaigns to pass more than 20 state laws, while also defeating many others that would have harmed working families, and has trained more than 25 Louisiana undergraduate students in policy and advocacy through its College Fellows program. Working across numerous policy areas, including labor rights, decriminalizing poverty, environmental protection, and good government, Peter and his organization have been able to measurably move the needle in the direction of people who are often excluded from policy and decision-making processes in Louisiana. I'll now pass it off to Rebecca to finish introducing our panelists, and then go ahead and get started with the conversation. Thank you.
No. Sounds a little low. Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3. Is that better? Yeah, there we go. Thank you guys. Well, as you guys can see, we have an incredible panel of experts. We have folks from every different sector: housing and insurance, water law, coastal resilience and environmental protections, energy, utilities, state governance. So we're going to have a robust conversation here. We're going to have a facilitated discussion. And then at the end, we are going to open it up for a Q&A. Our idea is to have folks sort of line up over here. We'll put a mic there when we're ready for that. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask our panelists about this. This year, in the last couple of years, we've really had a transition in policy and what that looks like, particularly for the environment, right? At a lot of levels of government. And so we're gonna jump right in and talk about it. There were hundreds of bills that are, proposed and passed and everything, and we have about 45 minutes to do this. So, you're gonna hear, we're gonna do it. Jumping right in, I'm starting with a hot topic, particularly here for New Orleans: water utilities. Water utilities get their fair share of criticism, particularly the Sewage and Water Board. There's a saying in project management, right? Pick two: fast, good, or cheap, right? If you want it fast and good, it won't be cheap. If you want it fast and cheap, it won't be good. Water utilities often struggle with this trade-off, particularly because of federal disinvestment in water utilities over the last 50, 60, 70 years. And because of this struggle, there's been a large focus on restructuring water utilities across the state, especially here. Right? Several bills this year affected how water utilities are managed because they haven't been able to keep up, including courts appointing new companies or individuals to take over struggling water utilities, to even, in this one didn't pass, but shifting oversight of our water rates from the New Orleans City Council to the Louisiana Public Service Commission. So my first question to you all is, how do we make sure changes in oversight genuinely improve services for residents rather than just shifting bureaucracy? And how can water utilities balance affordability, reliability, and accountability in the process? I know, it's tough.
There we go. One of the interesting things we've seen with Governor Landry, with the presidential level, is that they've taken this idea of like move fast and break things. I personally disagree with how they're moving fast and how they're breaking things, but we also live in a time where people across political spectrums, ideologies, whatever, have a lot of issues with, and I think rightfully so, the way that institutions are operating. And I think you took a poll, right? Like, wouldn't matter whether somebody identifies as poor or rich, Republican or Democrat. In New Orleans, pretty much everybody had issues with the sewage water board. The problem, and so I think there is maybe something to the need to kind of, maybe not move fast and break things in the way that we're seeing, but to do some of that, to take a more active role, to not spend time just defending institutions. Now, the balance of those three ideas that you're talking about, that's where it's all done. That's, we've heard from the candidate, we've got a lot of candidates who are hopefully and are talking about this. I don't know that there is a magic solution though. I think that's the main thing, is that it's really hard. So when you talk about this idea of like, we shouldn't just protect institutions, we actually need to get in and, like sometimes take a hammer to it, and we need to, actually really tear these things apart. You can't just do it in a way that's like, I'm sorry to hit on national team, but like, we're just gonna send the National Guard to DC and that's gonna fix things, right? Like, you can't do it in a way that's just superficial. It's, who can get in and like actually take the engine apart and figure out how to make it work again, because I don't think anybody thinks it's working right now. I don't know the balance of the three things, so I wish I had that figured out.
I always do, so, yeah. This wasn't my question on the train, that was what I was thinking. Yeah. Is it yours? Okay, all right.
It's anybody's.
Okay, anybody?
Yeah, go for it.
Now you have to answer. I know, I wrote it, huh? So, +1 for everything Peter said, but the pivot is that we can fix these things, right? We don't have to accept this paradigm that keeps getting put in front of us. We have these false choices all the time. We've got to accept the unacceptable. We've got to live with the stagnation. We've got to live with the lack of imagination, the lack of leadership, the lack of understanding, or we've got to let ourselves be rolled over by people who do not care whether or not we take our next breath, as opposed to all the things that we cherish. And there is a different path forward. There is, especially when you talk about water. And I'm gonna shout out our friends here, because I'm gonna do what you can't do, Rebecca, is one of the themes of the Water Collaborative has been what? Living with water, right? Yep, come on, everybody knows movement, right?
Yes.
Right? Yes. So the Water Collaborative has been pushing and fighting for us to understand that we can live with water. When we talk about who we are as Louisianians, as New Orleanians, that's just not platitudes, that is our way of life. And we have to make pivots. We've made these massive infrastructure investments, these pumps that failed us at Katrina, that were also causing the problems. Like, how many of you learned so much about subsidence in the last 20 years, and that pumping things out is bad? Right? We know all of that. So what do we do moving forward? That does not mean that the Sewage and Water Board gets to remain broken. Does not mean that we have to just suffer through water up to our knees when it rains for 10, 20 minutes or 2 hours. There is a path forward. We can do this. And there's people who have studied it. There's people who have done the research. There's plans that have been put in place. And yes, those plans and those institutions have struggled with equity issues. That's the elephant in the room. The people who know better don't always do the right thing. And so we've got to move very quickly into accountability and co-governance. When we empower an agency and say, hey, you have this money, you need to spend it. And then because they're slow and they're unsure or chicken shit or whatever, the money is still there 2, 3, 5 years, and then the money is endangered by an authoritarian clown in orange makeup. And so what we can't fight for is, y'all keep screwing around. And so we're gonna fight the authoritarian clown in orange makeup while you keep screwing around. That's not what we're doing. The money shouldn't have been there that long. You need to get on the, we're going to maybe replace some of you who have been empowered and find people who are ready to do what's necessary. And that's a fairly pointed, pointed example. But there's local examples all the time, especially with sewage and water board, right? There are hundreds of millions of dollars that have been invested in New Orleans that didn't go where they're supposed to. And we can't just go, well, we missed that opportunity. And again, with the sewage and water board, one of my favorite accounts on Twitter, Matt McBride, constantly talking about what's going on with the pumps. There are people who know what to do. We need to be listening to those folks, and we need to make sure that our legislators and our leaders are acting on the information that we all understand. And then you all gotta stand up and say, oh yeah, my life is better, or no, my life is not better. This is still not working. You need to go back again and fix it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, right, many of us here live in southeastern Louisiana. We face these water infrastructure issues all the time, right? Boil water advisors. Who's dealt with that? Raise your hand, right? Yep. Utility outages that happen, yep. Saltwater intrusion that impacted all of us, yep. Right? And so the legislature, recently created a task force to study the feasibility of constructing a regional consolidated water treatment facility for St. Charles Parish, Jefferson Parish, Orleans, St. Bernard, and Plaquemines Parish. So it would consolidate all of that water treatment. What are the potential benefits and consequences of creating a regional water purification facility?
Why, thank you. So benefits first, right? That seems relatively easy, just given. So we'll talk about this in the context of saltwater intrusion, right? So saltwater intrusion, I assume we all have a vague idea now, is when there's a drought upriver in the Midwest or whatnot, there's not enough water coming down the Mississippi River to push the Gulf back out into the Gulf, right? Because the bottom of the Mississippi River is below sea level all the way up to Natchez. So that water wants to fill in all the way up to Natchez, but it's the flow of the river that pushes it out. And when there's not enough fresh water in, that salt water, which is heavier, comes up the river. It's called the saltwater tongue. It comes up the bottom of the river. And normally it's not a big deal, but if you get it up to the point where you get your drinking water from, it's a big deal. And so when this first came up a couple of years ago, and it's come up before, but when it came up most recently, it was dramatic. Like I was out of the country and I had people texting me like, oh my God, we need to get, like what's going on? And there was this idea that like the river had suddenly switched like one day from like freshwater to saltwater. But because of things like water use upstream, because of things like drought and climate change, because of rising sea level, because of a deeper navigation channel to make sure that we can handle Panamax ships, even if the Panama Canal itself doesn't have enough water to handle those ships. All of these things add up to increase our exposure to saltwater, intrusion of the river, which is where everybody in the region gets our water. Background lecture aside, the reason that it makes sense to regionalize the utility is because, well, one, it's clearly all coming from one direction. And so the farther downriver you get your water from, the more likely you are to run to deal with that. But it's not as if that's the only issue that could affect drinking water in the river. There could very well be a spill somewhere up in the petrochemical corridor. And that could affect water intake up in St. Charles Parish way more than would affect, intake in St. Bernard Parish. So being able to compile vessels of resources to, move stronger together than apart, that kind of stuff. Additionally, right, part of the pain that sewerage and water boards have been feeling for the last 5 or 6 decades is we have half as many ratepayers in Orleans Parish than we had in 1960, right? And so, where have a lot of those ratepayers gone? They've gone out to these other parishes. So if you want to kind of collect enough people, enough ratepayers, enough citizens to be able to have the scale of the utility to deal with something like, oh my God, our entire water supply is getting tainted. Everybody who is on blood pressure medicine needs to go and buy 500 plastic bottles of water. If we can avoid that, then the drawbacks, which might be lessening of like specific local powers, perhaps maybe like there was a concern about being drowned out by some of the other parishes in decision making, things like that. Sure, those can exist, but I think to me it's the most logical and simplest way to answer this is to combine the resources across the region. Same thing they've done up in Virginia and Hampton Roads area, right? Hampton Roads has at least 5 or 6 different municipalities. They all have one united water utility, right? Because they figured out that same kind of thing, that it works much better with taking combined forces. I killed it.
No, I agree with that. I'll actually follow up with, if a facility, if there was for this one facility, a power outage.
It's a power.
Something like a power outage, could that affect everybody? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, sure, there's not necessarily a reason to consolidate it all into one facility, right? Like, to be able to have shared facilities across the region makes for much more flexible operating than would be able to say, oh, well, I'll just get all of our water from one place in Butte or something. That's not gonna make for resilience, right? That's just gonna lock us into that one thing.
The industrials also, but we can also use it as an opportunity. Again, the logistics of it meaning it shouldn't be in one place, but as much of it is that is concentrated, can also take advantage of some of the more modern technologies, like instead of being dependent upon the grid that we're all dependent upon, some independence, its own renewable sources of energy.
We'll get there. We'll talk about it.
Well, but, I mean, that's one of the things that we can do with a facility like that, is model those kinds of things. Putting another big, you call it a repair, is where I'm from. Yeah, we don't need no more plants or big businesses out there for repair. Even though it would be for the benefit of all, I mean, we've got to be thinking about this in this way. You can truly do this in a way that's sustainable.
Okay, yep, all right, there we go. Moving, we're gonna talk about insurance now. Your favorite topic, I know, yeah? Last year, changes intended to make the insurance market more competitive had some negative effects for homeowners, like canceled policies. We saw that in a lot of different ways. And so this year, I actually experienced that too. This year, several bills aim to provide relief, calling on Congress to end FEMA's risk rating 2.0, offering up to $10,000 in a state tax credit for fortified roofs, directing a portion of insurance premium taxes to the Louisiana Fortified Homes Program. Could these measures help stabilize neighborhoods and prevent displacement? And are there any equity concerns, particularly for low and moderate income homeowners or renters in the process?
Some of people didn't say no to the first question. They won't. And break it down why. So we talked about the bills where, one, we're excited about more money going to the Fortified Roof Program. That's always something to cheer for. But again, we're not putting enough, right? We broke down some numbers for the legislators, and the bills that Senator Duplessis championed were aligned with those stats that in order to get to the tipping point, one of the big problems that people are struggling with insurance is that a lot of people don't understand, including our lawmakers and some of our lawmakers, and the insurance commissioner and the government themselves struggle to think about what is beneficial for all of you, as opposed to what they feel like doing from a policy perspective. So number one, the big issue is our houses are not in great shape because of Katrina and Rita and Gustav and Ike and Isaac, the 2016 flood, you name it, keep going. They're challenging, and this is across the state. It's not just in New Orleans thing. This is a statewide issue. How this needs to be invested in. We're a poor state. We don't have a lot of our own working capital. Banks at the national level have been disinvesting in housing. A lot of you may not know this, but there's only 2 banks in the city of New Orleans that will lend you less than $40,000 against the value of your house. So if something happens and you need to fix it, you can't pull the equity out of your house for something low level, and you need something catastrophic to happen in order for you to get big money out of it. And a lot of people have named storm deductibles. So in a big event, you've got $20,000 deductible that you got to come out of pocket for, and then you got to get the rest of the money. So if you need a roof, and that's $10,000, $15,000, guess what? You're coming out of pocket for it if it's a named storm. And so that's when, so we don't have a lot of money going into sustaining our house and maintaining our houses. We've got utility issues that also make it really hard. We got older housing stock that, you know, has a lot of wind and water and air issues that also eat up costs. So there's really simple answers. Making our homes more weatherized, fortifying the roofs, 1-2 punch. We can get it done for about $72,000, but again, you can't really finance that, you can't really secure it. So with that as a backdrop, the fortified roof is the answer. It strengthens the homes, it makes them more resilient. It's not just about lowering the cost of insurance, it's about making the home safer. The technology is really extraordinary, right? We're talking about the fact that you keep the roof together up to category 3 winds. And the reason that insurance companies like that is if the roof doesn't peel off, you don't get water inside of it, it doesn't damage as much, so that's why they like it, but you also like it, and we also love it, because it means your home is gonna be safer, right? That's what we should care about. So this is actually one of the things, a solution that everybody can agree on, except who's gonna pay for it and how we're going to get it done. And so there's hey, let's mitigate the risks. We agree with that. And mitigate the risks to the people as well as the insurance companies. We agree with that. How long it should take and who should pay for it. At the current pace, the legislative auditor released a devastating report at the current pace of putting on fortified roofs, which is, we've had a $30 million program that's been online for about 3 years. We still haven't spent it all. Putting more money towards it also is kind of one of those self-defeating propositions that I was talking about earlier. We put $30 million towards it 3 years ago and we haven't spent it. Why do you need more money? And so that's a self-defeating proposition that a lot of members of our government like to play at. And the issue is, we gotta get the money out of the hands of people who don't know what they're doing, and into the hands of people who do. Because this is something that we can do really quickly. It takes 2 weeks at the outside to put a fortified roof on. 2 weeks. Wow. And you can really get it done in a week, and you can really get it done in 3 days if you know what you're doing. And you got everything, you got all your bells and whistles, and you're ready to rock and roll. So it's something that can be done in 3 days, 2 weeks at the outside, and we're struggling to spend $30 million when there are thousands of people who need it. So what we put in place is a little bit more money and a tax credit that will let people who can afford to fund all of the money come back and get a $10,000 credit. But at the current pace, with people paying for it out of their own pocket, the legislative auditor found that we get to that 25% tipping point in 2062. I heard that right? 2062. At the current pace, with the dribblings of the money that we have, and people who have the money getting their own fortified roofs themselves, 2062. So this is just something that has to dramatically increase. We can get this done in less than 7 years. We can get to 25% in 5 years, actually. And it's what we need to be doing. And we're screwing around at the edges and nibbling around this in a way that's just really unproductive. We also need to stabilize people while we work on that 5 years. In New Orleans alone, in the metro area, we've lost 26,000 people in New Orleans, 39,000 folks in the region in the last 5 years. This is not working. The folks are not stable, they're getting pushed out at a ridiculous rate. This insurance crisis will do what no hurricane has managed to do. It will depopulate Southeast Louisiana and South Louisiana, faster than any disaster that we're thinking about.
I just want to add one more thing to it. In addition to doing
all here, and we also have to not undo the good things that we have done so far. And so that's levy boards, professionalizing levy boards here in the city. That's not sending a good message to anyone of this here or anyone in the insurance industry if we're allowing cronyism and political decisions to creep back there. That's the science-based coastal master plan, which says we're going to invest state money in projects that are modeled to actually solve the problem in some way, and to the degree that we can solve the problem. So I think to see a retreat, we're not doing enough on the proactive, progressive side of the insurance problem. But we're also simultaneously, this is just a preview for other topics that we might get to later, but stepping away from some of the few things that we have done a solid job of since Katrina, like trying to put ourselves in the right position, things that we should be, continuously improving. Not that we've done everything right, and it's a finished project, but we certainly don't need to just flush it and replace it with bad things.
Absolutely. And speaking of coastal protections and environmental protections, one really big law in particular, but several laws affect wetlands, marshes, Mic check? Okay, we're back. And this year, Louisiana, in line with sort of the Sackett versus EPA decision, redefined waters of the state. Okay? They removed protections from water bodies that are not directly connected to navigable waterways, which leaves a lot of different bodies of water, important bodies of water, vulnerable. But they also created the Louisiana Conservation Incentive Program, which helps private landowners improve wildlife habitat and wetlands. So there's sort of this mismatch of ideas going on. What impact will these laws have on coastal restoration and statewide flood protection goals?
I think this one's me again. Yeah, let me try to be law professor quick. So the Clean Water Act has a lot of different parts to it. The Sackett versus EPA case that the Supreme Court decided in 1993 reduced the applicability of the dredge and fill section 404 for wetlands, especially in the United States at the federal level. The Supreme Court justices who made that decision basically said, like, this is stuff that should happen at the state level. Meanwhile, the same people whose brief they're citing when saying that are also lobbying at the state level to make sure that the state level protections can go back too. Louisiana is one of several states that this has been happening. The odd thing is Louisiana doesn't actually have like a section 404 dredge and fill permitting program at the state level. Here in Louisiana, it's operated by the federal government. Like in most states, we do have the point source pollution, section 402, which is what this law that got passed this summer is trying to apply the Sackett standard to that. So it's actually applying like the wrong standard from the wrong part of the Clean Water Act to a different part of the Clean Water Act. So like all it really does is add confusion. It doesn't necessarily change anything. The fast lands kind of language that went in there is kind of Coastal Zone Management Act stuff. Really, it's not really Clean Water Act stuff. But they're trying to also use that to reduce the water protections under the Clean Water Act. All it's really going to do is confuse things, which, no, it doesn't help coastal program, right? Making this sort of stuff muddier and kind of misapplying standards from one section to another is not.
So I think also interesting to talk about the politics. As far as I know, I was the only person lobbying against this bill when it was going through. It was really hard to explain to people. Fast lands, wetlands. We went back and forth. Senator Plessis, Representative Willing up there. I was like, just it's bad. Just please trust me that it's bad. It would take way too long. And that was like a Cliff Notes version of the whole thing. I was like, please just trust me, it's bad. You don't want to do this. And they listened, so that, to their credit on that. Unfortunately, not a lot of others. It does just confuse things. I think when we're looking at these two acts that came, one theoretically removes protections. This one that we've been talking about. One theoretically incentivizes owners to sort of add protections or to enhance. I think what we should look at is let me back up for 1 second. So the confusion, a big issue with why the bill was so poorly written is that the author of the bill, this guy, Senator Big Mike Facey, is a nut. I mean, like, you know, he writes and files all sorts of bills that just make absolutely no sense. He was the guy that, like, the anti-cloud seeding bill. I mean, all the nuttiest things. So, I mean, we're lucky, and maybe I should say something. Like, we're lucky that someone smarter didn't do this, so they might not have had all of the, you know, they might be a little clear. What we find in Louisiana, and I think a lot of people I know, a lot of people in this crowd see, you know, can attest to personal experience, is that when we remove protections, no matter how confusing and poorly worded it might be, people take advantage of that in a very negative way. When we offer incentives to do the right thing, few people take advantage of it. And so I think when you look at the politics, you look at the history and how people and corporations in the state operate when you do this kind of thing, the good sort of sits on a shelf and the bad gets exploited as much as it possibly can. And so while that analysis of what passed was absolutely right, it will probably make it easier for folks who do want to exploit it to find a loophole, to argue something, and then you get in front of a court. I mean, you know, things could, you never know with courts. But there's
I would say there's probably very little chance of enforcement on anything before that, right? And I would also say that, yeah, the conservation funding kind of thing. Oh, we're giving money to landowners. What a novel idea, right? So I'm like, but I didn't see anywhere in that actual act, like, where that money's coming from, or any money actually going into that fund. It's like, we'll create a sub-account of the conservation fund that exists. Maybe someday some money will go into it, right? And I think that the bill that Fezzi got, at least for this one, it's the exact same. It was like it was handed the exact same money to people in Kentucky and Tennessee and a bunch of other places.
If you're just hearing about this for the first time, it may be because you know this bill actually is the bill that renames the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana into the Gulf of America. And so if you're saying to yourself, and you're wondering, why did nobody come to lobby against this bill here? It's because initially this bill was just the Gulf of America bill. Right? That's how it was portrayed. It wasn't portrayed as a huge reform to water law and wetlands and how we treat those things under Louisiana state law. It was presented as the Gulf of America. Yeah. So one fun trick to throw people off your trail is to give somebody something to look at.
And just to follow up with what Peter was saying too, I think if you're for something and you're pushing to get a new incentive, a new tool in the toolbox, these are all good things, but that's not the end of the battle. You've got to like put money in the account or like actually give the incentive to a person that wants to use it. You've got to measure like what are the actual outcomes. And I just think that sometimes, I spent a long time working to get more tools in different toolboxes before, and we just got to keep advocating for it and keep tracking it and keep watching it. And so, NGOs, civil society, everybody's got to kind of stick with it and see if we're actually using these things as we go through.
Yeah, thank you all. I think we need to do a better job of marketing this, right, to folks, right? The Gulf of America, that was a big thing, and that's how people think about it. Jackson, I'm looking at you for this one, and others who want to do it. We saw a lot of effort, in terms of trying to, again this year, advance carbon capture and sequestration. Several of those made attempts to protect communities in the process, including directing 30% of revenue to local parishes, increasing penalties for violations, mandating prompt public notification for incidents. I do want to note, though, that in contrast, legislation that did not pass would have created a more proactive approach, right? Emergency response plans, mandated training for operators and emergency responders, and requiring operators to actually carry insurance to cover the cost of environmental damage. Considering what did and did not pass, and beyond what I've talked about, do these efforts adequately address community risks of carbon capture and sequestration?
No. Everybody who's unfamiliar, just very quickly, carbon capture sequestration, what this is a phrase that refers to the use of technology that you usually put put on a smokestack or some industrial facility that is in theory capturing, using some chemical process or material process to capture carbon dioxide, other pollutants, then concentrating that into a usually a liquid form, putting that through a pipeline, and then pumping that underground. Here in Louisiana, we are trying to establish those things. You may have heard of the project of Lake Maurepas, for instance, so using lake beds, things like that, and also eventually other processes. So if you're not familiar with that process, that's the very quick version of what we're talking about. It's become very controversial in part because for a number of reasons. There's a number of us who see this as not actually a solution for climate change or for addressing issues of pollution and other economic and environmental injustices. There's also issues that have to do with, for the Alliance, for those who are not familiar, for the last 20 years, the Alliance for Affordable Energy has existed. Very quick. To advocate on behalf of Louisiana ratepayers at the Louisiana Public Service Commission and the New Orleans City Council on utility regulation issues. One thing that they don't talk about with carbon capture as much in many of these things is that it is enormously expensive from an electricity and energy consumption perspective as well. Right? So when you put CCS onto a power plant, you're making that power plant about 30% less efficient, right? So you have to burn a lot more energy in order to provide the amount of electricity that you did before. And that raises your electric bill, amongst other things. So we have not addressed that part at all. There are a number of things I think that these bills regarding public safety are actually a recognition. This is progress in some ways. The conversation about CCS is no longer being purely driven from the perspective of industry. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is actually part of why these public safety bills are not going quite far enough, is that for the last few decades, the trend really has been for industry pushing towards deregulating of the public safety processes, right? So there's been a number of efforts to remove public notification of pipeline leaks. There's been a lot of efforts to remove public notification of industrial facilities leaks, right? And allow industries, for instance, to pay for their own audits, and if they self-report a leak, then they don't have to let you know. They just have to let the Department of Natural Resources know, and then they can keep that confidential for perpetuity, right? These are things that are all happening in the state legislature every year. It's important to pay attention. Hopefully, I'm sure many of you are too. But these are part of the reason that we're having so much trouble getting these public safety changes made for things like CCS is in fact because there's been a long-standing effort by industry in particular to lobby for the opposite on everything else. So, all that to say, there are a lot of risks, potential risks to the community. There was actually a whole task force that the Senate did establish to explore risks. It was stacked with attorneys who represent CCS clients, so it didn't really do a very thorough job in considering our objections. And also, it's not actually, it still is not reported publicly, its findings, which is interesting. It's supposed to report it last February, so we'll see if we'll ever get that report. But all that to say, there are some new public safety measures that were passed. We appreciate that on the part of the legislature. We have a long way to go.
Just really quickly, because Jackson tried to explain to you very quickly how the process works, I would like to essentially paraphrase one of the lobbies for CCS, who in a committee hearing explained how it works. He said, we capture the carbon and we put it in the ground. So, a lot of people talk about this is a proven technology. It is not a proven technology. Literally, the person who has paid a lot of money to convince legislators that it's good, his description was, we capture the carbon, put it in the ground. So, you can shorten yours.
Actually, it is a proven technology. It's called plants.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to go the other direction, which is it is proven to be very effective in helping produce more oil and gas. Yeah. Right, so industry has done for many years, what they do is they put their waste back underground to push out more pockets of oil and gas towards other spent or lower production oil and gas wells, and that's a way for them to kind of help get that out. You might be wondering, like, why is this all happening? But the answer is the federal government is subsidizing it heavily, and actually going to be subsidizing it more heavily very soon, and that allows them to make money off of you to then produce more oil and gas and sell for more money for them, which then also means more money from you, because then they'll have more control of the oil and gas they use for everything else. So it's not a great deal.
Yeah, I mean, energy, we again have this big transition in energy, and this year, additionally, several laws change how we define and implement renewable energy. This year, the legislature established stricter permitting requirements for large renewable energy projects. And then also expanded the definition of green energy to include natural gas and nuclear power. How do these laws shape Louisiana's energy future, right? Do they encourage innovation? It's to some extent, but also risk slowing, obviously, the transition.
Great question. I would say no to the innovation question, because I think that, so if you're not familiar already, so this bill, HB 692, which is now Act 462, is a bill that redefines what green energy is, to include things like natural gas, which is not green energy by any other definition of the Louisiana's. It also basically stated, what it tries to do is it tries to say that the state of Louisiana needs to focus on deploying certain energy resources that are, by the definitions they set out in this bill, have to be basically fossil fuels, right, in order to meet the definitions. The idea here is really, I think, to guide what's called, in the utility world, what's called the integrated resource planning process, which is how your utility decides how it's going to produce your electricity every few years, right? So Entergy goes to the Louisiana Public Service Commission, they say, here's how we're planning to provide your electricity and electricity for all of our customers, residents, businesses, industry, here's how we're going to produce them. And this bill is trying to say, you have to do it with natural gas, right? Already, about 3/4 of our electricity is produced using natural gas in Louisiana. Louisiana and New Orleans is slightly different because we use slightly more nuclear, but about 3/4 of our electricity is produced right now using natural gas, which means that adding more natural gas is only going to make us more dependent on natural gas. You may have noticed that your electricity bill this past month was outrageously high. That was in large part because of the spikes in prices of natural gas that have to do with things like data centers coming online, and with things like the beginning of liquefied natural gas exports. These things are all creating competition for the use of gas, and they're going to make it harder for us to keep the cost of those things down. And if you increase the reliance on natural gas for what you get your electricity from, the prices will continue to go up. The bill did make change, and actually, thank you to Senator Plessis and the other senators in the room who helped make this change. That does actually put some of the renewables back into play there. But this bill in general is trying to put Louisiana on track for a very specific energy vision. And I think the governor made very clear what that vision is when he came out the other day saying, we're not going to do any more solar, we're not going to do any more wind. And actually, he signed this bill in front of an oil barracks, which is good visuals. It's convenient, it's not work. But not good for us. Not good for us as customers, not good for us as a state, especially when we're talking about impacts from climate and to public health.
I'm just going to add one more little layer to this energy conversation. It's just the federal and then the state thing. So we, towards the IRA and the bill, big federal laws that got passed in 22, 23, I guess, or 21, 22, something like that. But we were, in the John Bell administration, we were going after every dollar we could get that was available for the state. It was stuff we needed in general, and it was stuff that helped us reach our climate goals. We had all these different reasons to go after this thing. And so one of them, all these things take way too long to actually show up in your bank account, to get spent, and to actually get used. But one of the things that was recently canceled, this is not the legislature's fault, I'm just taking one, this is not you guys, this is the federal government, EPA, just kind of deleted the $156 million that's going to come to Louisiana for a solar and green bank, essentially, to provide solar panels for low-income households and others. And those dollars were kind of basically legally, because the company was trying it out, but they were already obligated, they were supposed to come here, and they said, we're not going to give them to you anymore. And so there was an appeals process that the state administration could have taken to say, no, we want those dollars for our program, and they chose not to do that. There was another program that was a $250 million grant program for microgrids that they did not get back. So that is good, it's still there, but we had when we devised it, kind of the first time it was designed to be kind of a carbon-free microgrid approach, so we were trying to meet kind of adaptation and mitigation goals at the same time. So it's still there, we need microgrids, but it's going to be the green part that the the carbon-free part's kind of not there. But, so one good, one bad, but I would say, to the legislators in the room, I mean, you could, there's an oversight question, hey, what happened to that money, can we get it? There's a way to kind of step in and try to maybe just at least shine some light on some of these programs that we're now missing out on. And it's not always just to call the government either. A lot of this is starting at the very top.
Thank you. Yep. I have, one more question that I want to ask of you, and then I am going to turn it over to Jessica briefly for a second. This is sort of it focuses on environment in a lot of ways, but there was really, really big theme this year around state governance and changing governance and what that looked like, right? Restructuring state departments and commissions, consolidating authority at the state level. This included revising the composition of the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authorities, creating the current authority that Kennedy mentioned when she spoke, which is to manage those non-coastal flood control and infrastructure projects, and replacing the Department of Energy and Natural Resources with the Department of Conservation and Energy, which basically centralizes permitting, enforcement, and water management under a single secretary. And some of these bills were hundreds of pages long, right? There's a lot that you can sort of sneak in there, and people don't have the time to read and really understand what this means. And so I want to ask, in your opinion, what is motivating these large shifts in power? And are there benefits or consequences to these efforts in restructuring our governing authorities? Charles, you want to take this time?
Well, I mean, to start with a general context, I mean, a lot of the things, the policy 101 is like, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? And then does your solution have anything to do with actually solving that problem? You're trying to do that. So some of these bills, like, there literally is no problem, like the DNR bill, let's just start with that one. I mean, the DNR reorg, okay, they hadn't been looked at, they hadn't reorganized their shop since the 70s or something. That's great, go ahead and do that. But what they tried to do first time around, they wanted to take over CPRA, take over the Watershed Initiative, take over the State Lands Office, take over LOSCO. It's like, well, how are groundwater commissions? So they were following an executive order that said you need to streamline your operations. And you also need to take over like every office that you can in some government like that. How's that going to work? But there was also no like reason for being other than because we were going to do this. So I think at the end of the day, that bill, except for one huge caveat, this 100-page bill, was kind of like it didn't do all the things that it set out to do at the beginning. It's kind of it reorganizes DNR, which is, at least, except for this, Chris is going to take over this 11th hour, 12th hour, more massive to it. Yeah, go.
Well, yeah, the caveat I was going to ask, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. First of all, like, Office of Conservation has always been the tail wagging the dog within DNR, and so just like go ahead and slap in their name on top, like, actually, I'm probably more honest than it has been for the last so many years. And in case you don't know, Office of Conservation in Louisiana does not mean conserving bunny rabbits and trees. It means conserving wellhead pressure, so injecting things back down into the ground so that our wells keep on continuing to produce oil and gas. That's what conservation means. And so now it's the Office of Energy and Conservation, which is kind of the same thing. If the only energy you think you should use is oil and gas. The caveat thing, like from this massive long bill, they got taken out, put back in, taken out, put back in, is an attempt to make legacy lawsuits over oil and gas pollution, almost impossible. And that was actually, at one point, what Governor Landry went to the committee saying, don't put that in there. And then it came out, and then somebody put it back in, and he signed it. So I guess he didn't mind what they put back in, but yeah.
But that's in effect for like 2 or 3 years. So the pieces that were added back in are still 2 or 3 years.
Right, there's a deadline, there's a date basically, like if you're gonna bring, and so this is decades worth of like politics and litigation inside baseball kind of stuff on how, you can bring a lawsuit if your land has been polluted by an oil well. They fought it for so long, and they got to something that worked, but there still wasn't enough, and so they managed to get it back into to this, and yeah, they cut off dates to switch over to the new process, which basically is a process that allows, I'm still gonna call it DNR, to sort of like solve that process, not just the litigation over the cleanup, but the cleanup itself, like in perpetuity, right? And so it's gonna have to get fixed again. But yeah, it was very much, we started in policy, what problem are you solving? The problem that was being solved is that certain political donors weren't happy enough.
Which is the segue to the levy board situation. So, I mean, again, so at the end of the day, the bill that was passed doesn't do that much terrible things. But there was this impulse, there was this instinct to go out and make certain people happy that nobody, it was all just kind of bad instinct kind of drive that. And I think that was the problem. So in not this 25 session, the 24 session, the governor got the power to appoint the heads of boards and commissions, more so than they already had. A lot of boards and commissions have like rotating seats, or you pick out of a list of 3, give about the mayor, give about, that kind of thing. And he kind of accelerated all that to kind of be able to change people right away. So he got the power to appoint the head of the Southeast Flood Protection Authority, East and West, the slump funds, we call them. Okay, so he got that power there, and so he immediately kind of put in his own person at the head of that. Lost 4 board members in the process, resigned in protest. Replaced the executive director, the person who does the day-to-day of the levy boards. And then so in 2025 is when a friend of the governor said, there's waste, fraud, and abuse with this whole nominating committee. We've got to get rid of that. So to back up to the Katrina, context that we're on today, I mean, the slum list didn't exist before, so there are, I think, 3 levy districts on the east side and 2 on the west side, and they created this superstructure that allowed them to kind of manage them as a system, to professionalize these boards, to make sure that we had experts that knew kind of, from an engineering side, like what you needed, to make it professional.
To make it an actual system, right?
An actual system.
Absolutely. And to take politics out of it, right? Like, the big lesson, suppose Katrina was taking politics out of that, while regionalizing, taking politics out of coastal planning, right? And the coastal master plan, that was supposed to be a politics-free zone. And it all ties back to the regionalization of sewage and water board and water intake stuff, right? We're all dependent on these neighboring parishes, but if you can't manage it in a way that actually like science-based and all of this, in the same way that politics is creeping back in, or has crept back into our flood protection, it would be very easy for politics to creep into regional water supply as well.
Yeah, and so the mechanism to do that was this nominating committee. It's all very boring. I didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole, but I know they're all So the instinct was we got to get rid of that. We've got to have complete, political control over who's on these boards. And luckily that did not happen. But that fight is not going to go away completely. This is kind of the new era, the new playbook. I just want to flag that for y'all, even though they didn't ruin it this time. Just stay tuned.
I think it's just coming back. It's all there, all this.
No, and I think that's a perfect way to end it. This is a new era with a new playbook, and I'm really grateful to you guys to be here to talk about this. And honestly, all of you that are here to talk about this, right? A lot of us, and I think maybe even in the crowd, work in policy and work in environmental issues, but not everybody does, and not everybody has time to know about this stuff. So grateful to you all for being here to learn more about this, right? And really the takeaway is, this is called public service, right? They're meant to be public servants. They're meant to serve us. And if there's more that we can do, as organizations or as people to actually market it better, educate better, advocate better, whatever we can do is so important to be involved at the state level, particularly because so many federal protections are going away right now, right? It's coming down to states and it's coming down to local governments in so many ways. And so that's a really great place to put our efforts. I don't know, I think we can go ahead and just do, if we do have some time for questions. Is there anybody here who is feeling very compelled? I'm gonna hand over my mic. Yes. Otherwise, well, it's, no. Oh, we're gonna do it, okay, I wasn't sure. We're gonna get some questions.
I know, we're gonna do questions, but we're gonna, part of the Q&A, we have a special guest, legislator Matthew Willard is going to join us for the Q&A. And so he's going to do a quick campaign spiel, but he's going to be able to answer questions about what is it like on the legislature to add to the conversation. He's been listening quietly in the audience, so please give a warm welcome to Matthew.
Thank you, Jessica. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matthew Willard, State Representative for District 97. Currently serve as the chairperson of the House Democratic Caucus. I've been in the legislature for 6 years. Passed 36 bills, done a lot of the homeowners insurance stuff that we were talking about. The fortified roof program that was in our legislation. The bill that requires your insurance company to give you a reduction on your premium if you have the fortified roof, that was in our legislation. Putting an end to, any of y'all ever have an inaccurate water bill from Sewage and Water Board? I still haven't gone to a room that doesn't have anybody raise their hand. Last year I passed legislation to put an end to estimated water bills from Sewage and Water Board as well. So grew up in Gentilly, been in New Orleans my entire life. Decided earlier this year to put my name in the hat for Council Member at Large Division 1, which is the open seat being vacated by Councilmember Moreno. I have a lot of stuff on my website, a full policy platform. If you want to check that out, it's MatthewWillard.com, and I'm happy to answer the questions. Thank y'all.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna hand my mic over. And anybody who does have a question, we'll just, Joey will figure it out.
Hello, my name is Melissa Gavin. I am a community planner for the Regional Planning Commission. I oversee the regions. We have 9 parishes, well, soon 9 parishes once we break St. James in. One of the things that one of our last statements that made me very compelled to ask this question is combating the misinformation in getting policies passed. So at the Regional Planning Commission, we are currently meeting with all the parish leadership. They come to us every second Tuesday of the month. We have a big meeting at the RPC to vote on regional issues. And one of the things we're hearing as we're talking to them is they're putting out referendums to say raise the levies or building pumping stations, lift stations, the green infrastructure in City Park that got shut down because the misinformation is causing the people who are able to vote these referendums up to end up killing them before they even take root because of that. So that is something that we're hearing from the parishes, Blackness Parish is dealing with their Jefferson Parish. We're hearing this from recently, as recent as like the other day with St. Charles, is they're having trouble getting their people to vote in their own interest because of what we're seeing both at the federal, state, and this has been 5 years that we've been hearing this reoccurring. And I know you guys were doing the stormwater fees. That was really impressive, like the workshop we just did. I know what you said. But I think, it's becoming more of an issue as we try to get people, and even at a local scale, to act right.
So yeah, this has been an interesting conversation that we've been having this week. And while I understand where the concerns are, I always want to kind of come back and be like, first of all, the voters are reacting to their realities 9 times out of 10. And who's delivering the best message, or even the worst message about it. And so when we all go on and on and on and on, I mean, I get it, we all policy wonks, we get it, but we've also got to talk about how to persuade. And again, it is not persuasive. Let's just keep doing the same thing that's not really working. Because there are challenges, there are issues, there's political shenanigans that we can't overcome. that's not inspiring, nor is it the job. Got some real bad news for everybody, right? We're not talking about turning lead into gold. We're not talking about magic. We're talking about often the application of math and science and logic and will. And most of the time, our planners and partners on the ground are implementing political weakness, and that's what doesn't work. That's the bad outcome. And so when we talk about executing good strategies, to your point, Charles, are we actually trying to solve the problem? Or are we trying to look like we're solving the problem while not pissing off elected officials and people with money and people who are scared of Black, brown, women, people who have gender identity, who are married and think that they can determine who they are themselves, if they're not scared of those people. Having a little more power or having any power at all. So we've got to really get at the conversation. Misinformation takes root because we're not talking really, we don't want to talk about really the challenges, because we like the person who is stuck in a bad situation. It's like, okay, just call them out and say, do better next time. And we want you to have a chance to do better next time. But right now, this isn't good enough. That's okay, it's not good enough. Are you gonna do better? And so we've been working to put policies together and messaging strategies together that get clearly through to everybody. One of the things that we're working with a lot of people on this stage, the Water Collaborative, other partners over the years, is to get past this notion that Louisianians are just too stupid to get out of their own way. Right? We have data that shows that 71% of Louisianians understand that climate change is a problem, thinks something needs to be done about it, and also thinks most of our leaders are ill-equipped to address the problem. Right? But it also prompts anyone who has the temerity to try to change it to act in a specific set of ways, right? So leadership, finding and supporting leaders who are ready to lead. 71% said, we don't have the people in power, don't have what it takes to address the problem. And you empowered them, and they would go, did we? Did we really empower them? When 18% of voters turned out, and that's how the governor got elected, you already they should have voted. For what? For who? Did they really have choices? Did they really have someone talking about what they were going to do for them? And when you do see things, people turn out, and you do see they get overwhelmed and they lose those fights, and we're not talking about how to continue to fight. Right? You're gonna go, oh, okay. Let's retreat, and Black people, women, y'all not gonna sit back down because y'all scared of white people, and that's why we got in this predicament. Not that folks don't want to share power. We've got to really start talking about what's actually happening, not talking around it, not talking under it. And part of it is also having these complex conversations so that we can understand that there are solutions, and then we got to figure out how to competently communicate that and sensitively communicate that to our partners, to community, and to voters. And then the accountability cuts both ways. We've got to hold our elected officials accountable, and communities got to be held accountable. But the blaming, the pointing, if there are not real solutions, helps nobody. And I think I get why there's so much frustration, but it is on us who have decided to lead to push through that, because we know that there's a solution, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about, you know there's a solution, and you need more help getting it out there. And I think a lot of problems that we have partners who are just looking for a cheap way out. Right? I've seen people ask, can't we figure out some way to trick them into doing the right thing? Can't we figure out a way to trick them into doing the smart thing? Can you? Clearly you can't. So let's settle with, if a better lie. That's not how this works. Especially when the answer is actually to just offering more distrust in communities that distrust you already. That's not the answer. We gotta get the information, and then we gotta trust them, and we gotta make sure that they have the room to act. Period.
Thank you. I'm getting another question.
Oh,
Good.
just one really quick, I think, the misinformation, we have to understand that most of this misinformation is being paid for by people with a lot of money who just keep pushing out like fire hose, right? And we're not gonna be able to counteract that unless you've got billionaire friends who want to, just open up the pocketbook. I think one way that we can do is that misinformation is lies, right? Like that's misinformation is another word for lies. Most of the time it's lies. Every once in a while it's true, but most of the time it's lies. I think in this moment, I don't know if this will continue to be the case, but I think right now what seems to be the most persuasive to people is authenticity. I think people sense that there's billions of dollars of bullshit being thrown at them constantly. And when you look at things that do tend to break through and that do that without having to spend a lot of money on it, it's when it comes across as just being really honest. So you, what's your name? Melissa, okay. You, given your job, I would assume know a lot about what you're talking about, right? And I think sometimes if somebody comes to you with some bullshit that they picked up on social media or whatever, that's got them scared, I know that I react like this. So you're like, okay, this person is throwing some bullshit at me, and I know they picked it up somewhere. I don't want to, call them for being stupid or something, right? Like, that's not going to help, we know that. But you almost like come at it when you're on your back foot, right? Because it's like they come at you with like, like this thing is going to do whatever. And you're like, oh, well, that's not right. I don't know. I think it's to come back at them, not in a way that you're insulting them or, that comes off. It's to be like, look, I have been doing this for a really long time. And I've seen this, I've seen that, and like what you're saying, like I have been there. I can tell you, and I think if you come at it from I'm not saying you're gonna persuade somebody in one conversation, right? Like, because they've been fed this bullshit, from all over and over again for years, or months, or weeks, or whatever it is. But I think right now, the most persuasive thing you can do, and the best way to deal with that misinformation is don't try and think about some talking point that you read about. Don't think about, well, I want to talk about this, but I'm not sure if I should. It's just be honest and be as authentic as you can. That feels to me, and what I've been seeing and what I've experienced, like the best way. I'm not saying it's going to fix the problem, but it seems like it's the best way to deal with it. And I think that if you deal with something like that, they're going to be much more willing to listen to you and actually hear what you're saying. You might not change their mind, but they're going to be willing to engage with you a little bit, in a little bit more of an authentic way themselves, and they're going to trust you because their bullshit meter isn't going to, go off. And so I think in your situation, you're actually dealing with what's on the ground. That.
So just a follow-up. So this is interesting. We just kicked off a $4 million project for branding and messaging for the Regional Planning Commission, authorized by their presidents to really start to create some messaging around planning and regional planning. And a lot of the regional stuff you guys know about, I have no idea what the plans is like. It has a lot of things that's everything's distracted. Like we have our own, which is most of that transportation environment nowadays. And then I know you guys have the housing, like you guys have so much more counterparts just at a smaller scale. And so a lot of it is kind of build that messaging comprehensively about how we build matters. The decisions we make now is what we should either reduce flooding impact or increase flooding impact. So we talk about impervious surfaces, so that's some that we are working with hospital and some other activities for that.
Tell them not to spend $250,000 on focus groups.
Oh,
Amazing. Thank y'all. We have time. I want to be conscious. I know we started a little late, so it's completely our fault. But I want to be conscious of everybody's time. So we have time for about one or two more questions. And then Robin, you have one here. If you want to go ahead.
Sure. I want to go back to something that Anthony said at the very beginning, which has really stuck with me, that we seem to be okay with a lack of leadership and a lack of imagination. And I want to really focus on imagination because I don't think we have a future unless we have imagination. And I want to cite a couple of things that, to me, is a result of people coming together and being very imaginative. The Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan is one such thing, the Coastal Master Plan. And these are not fantasies, they are backed up by science and had community input, and these are the big ideas. And I feel like we break things down too much into very micro, like, okay, we do this one thing over here, we do this one thing over here, but we have really stepped away from like the big picture and the systems and how does this all come together. So I guess my question for you all is, how do we hold our elected officials accountable for imagination?
I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, ever since you said that, I've just sort of been thinking like, oh, but all of these decision makers, right? Whether we're talking mayor, city council, governor, legislature, public service commission, every one of them needs an accountability buddy, and every one of us is that buddy, right? And so that's what's been in my head ever since you said that at the beginning of this. How do we try and squeeze imagination out of them? I mean, that's, let's find someone who runs on imagination. Let's find someone who actually is coming to it with, with imagination, maybe, rather than, I'm going to do the same old thing, but I'm going to do it better than the other guy, which is kind of the default, right? So, how do we demand that, creative problem solving is, the kind of thing I like to try and force my students into. I bet you have a problem with this.
So, I like to think I'm somewhat creative and think outside the box.
Elect artists.
All right. I said I like to think that I'm somewhat creative and think outside the box. Louisiana, the city of New Orleans, we have so many legacy problems, and we're not really trying to approach things differently. So if it hasn't been working for decades, essentially what we're doing is kind of throwing money down the drain. And so, but what I would say is, creativity is limited in some regard to certain people. Not everybody is, creative. Some people are going to say, give me this schedule and I'm going to execute it exactly how you want to do it. Other people are going to say, give me this schedule and I'm going to figure out 10 different ways to do it to come to the different result. So I think when you talk about leadership and holding them accountable, one of the most important areas that you need to consider is somebody who will be accessible and open to brainstorming and working on new approaches to solve some of our big ticket issues. Because, I think we can probably all comfortably say that if it goes beyond New Orleans, but if the coastal parishes in Louisiana don't figure out drainage, emergency preparedness processes, we're not going to be able to call this place home for too much longer, right? And so we know with the current drainage infrastructure in the city of New Orleans, we can only pump out, if everything's working properly, you can only pump out a certain amount of water every second. What else can we do to exceed that capacity? Because we know on a hard rain event, that's not going to get the job done, assuming that everything is working. And so I think as it relates to accountability, obviously the low-hanging fruit there is you always can vote against the incumbent, right? And so every, with the council, with the legislature, with the governor, every 4 years, with the PSC, every 6 years, you can always vote them out. But what I would encourage everybody in here to do is bring any good, innovative, creative ideas that you have to your elected officials. I've passed probably at least half a dozen bills in Baton Rouge that came to me directly from a constituent. One of them was, I passed a bill to eliminate Confederate holidays in the state. I didn't know they existed. Somebody sent it to me, said they existed, so I passed legislation to eliminate it. Got death threats, right? And so that's one thing that I would say, if you have ideas, if you're part of an organization that's doing good work and you feel like you can't make inroads with the proper elected officials, reach out. They're your representative. they're supposed to represent your interests. Reach out, see if you can have that conversation, and if you can't, well, that's very telling in and of itself.
Thank you. I think we have our final 3 questions. If we're okay with that lined up. I want to be very conscious of your time. If we want to also have questions afterwards, we can do that. Are you okay if we have the 3 lined up? And we can try to be more concise and very direct. I can start spinning in circles and tapping my wrist if you want me to, Rebecca, policy director. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, City of Shivers. I work with Finance Finance. We're a housing finance agency in Green Bay, seeking to bring financing and incentives to New Orleans to create resilient home ownership. We will be bringing financing for roofing this fall, as well as resilient infrastructure and resilient multifamily affordable development. So my question is, looking forward, Justin talked about looking forward to building. Love to hear what legislative priorities are on the horizon, and or Mr. Williams spoke to this a little bit just now, what we can do, what those individuals who are here today can do to help make our state more resilient in the coming months and years.
I actually talked to somebody about this, I think it was in 2021, to try to create some type of tax credit for green construction materials, so impervious pavements, permeable concrete and stuff like that. That's something, I think it'll be a far stretch, but maybe you can try that bill in, when's the next fiscal session, 27, Peter? You might, that's something that we can do. The city of New Orleans put some money aside to help people improve their homes to better live with the water. I forget what that program was called. Do you remember? It was tied to some federal money, but people were able to do like bioswales in their community and rain gardens. And, yeah, it was related to the. There you go. Yeah. So anything that we can do like that, but I think we also have to wake up to the fact that it's going to be tougher to pull federal dollars for anything like this, right? At least for the next few years. And so what we can do in the meantime is you drive around the city of New Orleans and you see a lot of homes that are in disrepair from Hurricane Ida. They need to be repaired. And, I think, pushing the fortified roof program is a great thing to do. By the way, the next round of applications opens up for that next week. So go in there and register. You can get $10,000 to put a fortified roof on your home. It's coastal parishes, so we're included in that. And something else, I know this is like dealing with water, but as we also talk about just the affordability crisis in the city of New Orleans right now, we use a lot of federal dollars to basically help people pay their utility bills, and a lot of people come back every month because they need help with their utility bills because they have a hole in their roof or a hole in their floor, or their windows don't work. And so why not, put some of that money into homes to help people reduce their utility bills long term as opposed to just one-time reductions. We have to be smarter with some of the infrastructure that we do. We have to do the basics and make sure that the catch basins are cleaned out. We have to make sure that the pumps are working, and anything that we can do to help us better live with water. The Mirabou Garden project in Gentilly, I think, could be a good project. There were plans for some other stuff on Elysian Fields that was going to help the city of New Orleans better live with water. And when we talk about creativity and innovation, I think that has to be part of the plan too. What can we do as a city to help us also live better with water, with the understanding that the floods are, likely going to continue to happen.
I'll say, at the state level, I'm part of a team that's been literally the last decade working on a comprehensive water code for the state of Louisiana. That is nearly done, and I think it should go to the legislature in the spring. And the hope is that it gets through without, really without a bunch of like exemptions getting put into it. A comprehensive water code for the state. So it's actually making, managing, and accounting for the state's water resources somebody's job. That includes things like subsidence that have come up here. Louisiana has so much water that we've never really took the time to worry about it, but other places are thinking about it. Texas is the most obvious one, but pick a Silicon Valley billionaire, and they think they want some of our water too, probably. So it actually is taking the idea is that it creates not just the capacity, but the responsibility for the state to take care of its water resources. And like I said, the danger, the worry is getting a bunch of exemptions put in, sort of like, yeah, we have to count water, but we don't have to count water that's going onto a field or down a drain or a well. So that's the thing that's on the horizon for me. So I do think we will get it to the legislature in 2026.
Yeah. More questions?
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Camille, I'm in Louisiana, right here, representing St. James Parish in the heart of Cancer Alley. I wanted to first address part of that question about creativity in leadership roles, and that the folks that we have elected so far have a lack of imagination, and perhaps that's because it's something we're used to. We don't think that we need creative people leading our country, that we think they should be very linear and binary at best. But I really liked what Christopher Dalbaum said about how everyone needs a buddy. And I think that buddy system needs to go a little bit further than a buddy. It might be like triplets, quadruplets, and beyond. So like a politician, getting someone that works on policy and different policy organizations and universities like yourselves, and then possibly people like us representing small orgs, and the people that we bring into those organizations, which are the artists, the cultural bearers, the healers, and the residents and community workers. And I think sometimes something that's really discouraging is we'll hold different info sessions, like someone said, don't hold another 200-hour info session or a survey session, and we'll hold those types of things, and we'll gather so much information from the people that we're serving, but we don't help them initially in that moment get back on their feet. So we're utilizing their information to make something sound better at this grandiose level that hopefully will trickle down to somebody. But how can we directly bring some of those funds to people right away that are in direct need? This bill or this Katrina money that's sitting around that everyone has had me sign up for this week or Katrina 20 to get that to be released, could that money be a direct impact to people, especially building roofs around the state? And that no one would have to go through their insurance company, that nobody would have to go through this type of premium process, that it would be a direct payout. And why can't we get the direct payout? It is because we lack that type of creativity and imagination that we can just give people what they need. So I just wanted to hear what you guys had to say about that.
That specific fix reminds me of a project that we started with some EPA money. We're going to use a parametric insurance policy. So it's triggered by a certain event. It rains 4 inches in 4 hours, then that policy pays out. They don't have to send an adjuster to your house. So we were going to go, and we were working in Franklin, Louisiana, close to Morgan City. We were going to cover the whole city. They just got some new floodgates through different funding streams and ran things. So they knew that flooding had gone down some, but they knew there were still spots where they were worried about people. So that gets the money to people within weeks instead of years if you're waiting on HUD or waiting on FEMA. So there are these tools that are out there, but then being able to pilot them, being able to spread them, being able to fund them sustainably so that it's not a grant may be canceled by the feds. That's the only reason it happens. So I think there are tools out there. We've just got to start grabbing. I love that the finance forum is here. Like, there's so many tools that we can figure out how to leverage, public dollars with private dollars to make things go further. We've got to be doing that and faster. So just, I think that innovation is around us, and I think when you have people that are, like you're saying, working in partnership with other groups, you can say, oh, I heard this great idea from over here, we got to do that. We got to do 10 times that in my community.
Have any of y'all been up to the state capitol? Raise your hand if you've been there. All right, so less than half of you. All right, when I took over as chairperson of our House Democratic Caucus, one of the things that I did was send out a memo to all of our advocacy partners. Anita's on there, Peter's on there. Do you have any bills that you need somebody to carry for you this session? And for the most part, I've been able to place a lot of those bills with members of my caucus because, and the reason I do that is because not only do a lot of elected officials lack enough creativity or innovation, frankly speaking, if you go up to the legislature, a lot of them are just lazy. And so they're not going to even file bills unless somebody gives them a bill to file. And so that's something else that you need to keep in mind. I think that's something that everybody in this room should be aware of. There are, if you go up there and you work with some of the other partner organizations, and you have an idea for something that would move us forward, then try to find somebody to file that bill, because I'm telling you, every year there's members who may file 1 or 2 bills, and it's because somebody gave them that bill to file. Not on their own.
All right, we have one final question back here.
Hi, I'm Kim Terry, and I'm with Northern East Green Infrastructure Collective. And we were just out on a trip to the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet. And as we, checked out the whole area, and we noticed that the marshlands are not being rebuilt. And if it is, it's on a slow pace. In terms of the community, we were all told that the levees were going to protect us. We also thought, because of this new protection and all of this, adversity about it, that we would eventually get insurance rates installed again, so that we wouldn't have to leave Louisiana because we can't afford to pay tax and insurance that's higher than a house note. So now, my thing is, when are we going to go back to the Army Corps engineers and ask them to restore and finish the coastal wetlands and the forests? How do we, get up every day and get dressed and forget to put on shoes? Because that's what essentially it is. So is there someone that knows what's going on with that? Because it's something that's a major issue.
It's a major issue. It's 20 years overdue. It's more than 20 years overdue. That channel caused 1 million acres worth of ecosystem damage, and they haven't done anything. Last week, they finally signed an agreement to agree to do design on some of the features to one day build them, if Congress one day gives them money to build them. So we are, we want to say, okay, you've taken the minimal baby step, you've gotten partly dressed without your shoes, and it's time to, so we, groups like ours, so we're going to Washington, we feel like this is a Washington issue at this point. For a long time, when I was at the state, at the CPRA, we were fighting back and forth with Congress about who has to pay for all this. Congress said full federal expense, well, but that might mean this, and so anyway, for a lot of years, we lost a lot of years just fighting Congress about who was paying for it. That has been settled, but the dollars have not been allocated yet. And that is a job. That is something that we take to Washington. We're going next week. We've been going. We're going to keep going. But it is a major problem. It's on our radar. I hope it's on the legislature's radar and others. It's insane.
And I do want to point out that there's 2 problems, right? Also as well. So you've got this long-standing issue. There are actually 2 insurance crises that you just talked about, and it's not one. It's 2. So there was an insurance crisis that happened after Katrina, after a storm and the levees breaching and that level of devastation, what happened? Even though homeowners insurance didn't have to increase because they bugged out and said, hey, this is a flood. Most people had flooding issues and while there was massive claims being paid, most people were devastated by floodwaters. New Orleans East, the Lower 94, Gentilly, City, Lakeview, that was floodwater, right? And so you have that crisis. There was risk, climate change, click for everybody, and there was risk there. What we're dealing with now is another crisis on top of that, right? That's connected to not just the disinvestment or the failure to address these coastal issues, but it's very much focused on how our homes have deteriorated in the last 20 years, the issues that have worsened with climate change, and other disinvestments that are happening. So it's a 1-2 punch. And so to your point, we have to do it all. We have to work on the federal piece. We also have to talk about the state and local piece, and it can't just be the state. We're waiting on the state. Our city officials, our local officials can help stabilize the people of New Orleans. There's things that we can do. Because we can't fight the state and the federal government if we're on our back foot, if we're on our back. Because our local elected officials are also going, well, we can't do anything. Well, and really, again, that's the lack of imagination, because it's a typical thing. Well, if it's the Fed, and it's big for the Feds, and it's big for the state, so why not blame it on them? Why not? It's not that it's not true. It's the lie is that they don't have any responsibility, that they don't have a way to help make us stronger for the fight with the state and with the federal government, right? We can build this up. We're talking about working regionally. We can inspire our neighbors, right? And we can actually have a regional position where New Orleans is one of the most frustrating things, and we talked to Rep. about it and Senator Duplessis, and they fight back against us all the time. Members of the delegation saying, well, we can't do anything because they hate New Orleans. And that's not how we move this forward. That's giving up, throwing up your hands and saying we can't do anything. Oh yeah. So we start locally with that imagination that it could be better, that your home could be safe. And that not being an imaginary thing.
I thought everybody loved the Mississippi River. And I thought everyone loved the fact that we depend on the buffers from the trees and from the marshlands and the wetlands. So I still think that, yeah, when you go to Congress or to Washington, this is something we can't do as residents. We can't also depend on just our state and local representatives. We need help from the federal government all the way to the top to protect the protection.
Okay, so I'll just to tie those two together, is that into what we said. We just gotta take swings. I think sometimes we're all too careful and we gotta wait until we've got 17 reports or we've done the focus groups. Just, we file 15 bills every year. Some of them are half-baked, sometimes I get my bill author in trouble. But you know what? Like, what the hell? What are we waiting on? So if you've got an idea, help, let's figure it out. Let's file an ordinance in the city, let's file a city. They filed the 10 Commandments bill in the school. That's completely unconstitutional. They don't care. It's like a way of just, for now. It's just a way of you gotta fight. I think way too often we play it too safe, we play it too close. I would rather get in trouble because I took too big of a punch and left myself open. And so I think that you got an idea, let's work together. Let's figure out how to file a city ordinance, a bill, or St. James Parish, whatever it is, and just push on something. Because at least you got a chance that way. If you don't do anything, you're definitely going to lose.
I think that's a really, really great way to wrap up this session. All of us do have power. Go talk to your legislators, bring your ideas to them. I think that's a really, really great thing for this session. Bring your ideas. They need them. They desperately, desperately need them. So I just want to give a round of applause and thank you, huge thank you to our panelists. Unanticipated, but I think that, it's worthwhile to sit here and have a healthy conversation. thank you again, we really appreciate it. If you want, you can read our full legislative report, there's a QR code, or if you want to attend more events that you're unaware of for the rest of the week, there's another QR code there too. Or you can go to our website, nolawater.org. So thank you again, and everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, all week for Katrina. All week for Katrina.
Thank you for your question. Thank you. And the work.
I always feel like I was holding hostage.
That's all right. That's all right. It's okay. All right. I gotta get back to the office.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Great job.